control. If you have a minority interest in a closely held corporation, you are lower than a snake's belly. Okay? I remember the pie company. Two ladies, best of friends in the neighborhood, bakers. They make pies, and they're going to go into business, and they're going to sell their pies. Their lawyer said, hey, you know what? In order to have votes, one of you ought to have 51%, one of you ought to have 49%. Oh, we don't care. We love one another. We don't care. We'll just flip a coin. 51% went to one lady, 49% went to another. They started selling pies. They had a couple of pie stores. Things were going pretty well. The 49% lady found herself out in the cold. Not only did she only own 49%, but they didn't put in any protections. And I've seen that scenario repeated more than once. Now, sometimes, particularly if you're young and getting started, you can't just command 100%. You got to raise some money, and you got to get a little bit of it away. Make sure that you're protected as well as we can. Next, quality of life. I call this the Q factor. Every time you make a decision, you're ready to make a decision, ask yourself, how will this affect the quality of my life? Now, sometimes you do that subconsciously. Let's say that you're offered a job in Minneapolis. I just saw Moneyball last night. Anybody see that? So the guy was offered the general managership of the Boston Red Sox for $12.5 million. And he was making a lot less in Oakland for a very small market team. But his daughter, who's divorced, and his daughter lived in Oakland, and he made a decision. He listened to himself and the Q factor. He made a decision to stay in Oakland for less money because he wanted to be a better father to his daughter. Quality of life decision. Ask yourself, okay, let's say I got a transfer opportunity to Nebraska. My family lives in Bloomington. Do I want to move to Nebraska? You might want to. Okay? That's okay. But you got to ask yourself that. Suppose I got a chance to work in a restaurant, and I got to be, during the dinner hour, I got to be cooking or managing or something while everybody else is having dinner. Or I got to be on the road 3 days a week. Or all those kinds of things. Take into consideration how these things will affect the quality of your life. Now, you may do them anyway, but factor in the Q factor. Now, everybody's going to have a different Q factor. Yours is going to be different than mine, and your Q factor is going to change. Younger and broke, I was running all over the place. I was making a movie in L.A., racquetball clubs I told you about, cable TV systems, radio stations, all over the country, traveling everywhere. Well, I got older, and frankly, I got a little bit more money. I had a friend who told me, a fat dog won't hunt. Okay? So as you get fatter, you get to be a fat dog, your Q factor is going to change. But if you're younger, you're going to have to take it into consideration, but you may go ahead and do those things. But Q factor is extraordinarily important, and it's a good lesson to learn. The next one, to show you that I know a little bit about the electronic age, I call it PDF. Actually, I don't know what PDF really means. But my PDF, I call pace, discipline, and focus. I have a friend in Indianapolis in the real estate area, and he's complaining to me. He says, if the economy hadn't crashed, I would have been one of the richest guys in Indiana. Well, he was right, sort of, but his pace was off. He did all the deals he could get, and they all looked pretty good. But he never took into consideration that with that fast a pace, if something did go wrong, he didn't have the resources to back him up. He was going down the tubes, and he did. Pace. He didn't have the discipline to say, wait a minute, maybe I won't be the richest guy around, but maybe I'll be okay if things don't go my way. He didn't have the discipline to do that. And because he had all that going wrong and all those deals, he didn't have the focus to focus on what was really important. There's a few deals to make them work. I tell my kids, and that's part of a group that will not listen to me, but in fact, I told my son the other day, I said, Todd, you're going to wake up at 3 a.m. one night, in the middle of the night. You're going to sit up right in bed, and you're going to put your hand on your forehead, and you're going to say, oh my God, my father was right. But I tell my kids, if you make 1 or 2 deals a year, and they're good, and you live a long time, you will be one of the wealthiest guys around. We're talking about giving back. And I look at it this way. Why is this important first? Well, in business, we need to have a stable environment in which to transact our business, a stable society in which to live, enjoy ourselves, and to be business people. Read the paper, the international section of the New York Times anytime you want, and you'll see what it looks like if you don't have that. And those of us who are in racial, religious minorities suffer disproportionately for a society gone awry. I'm a minority. I'm under 5'7", but you get the picture. It's important that we contribute and we give back, particularly to social service agencies. But it's also an obligation. The more money you make, the bigger that obligation is. I also want you to think about not only time, but your money and your talent. The last one is I call know when to fold them. I mean, we talk in school about how and when to make an investment. Do you ever talk about when to sell? When to fold them? No, I mean, I didn't learn that in school. Actually, I didn't learn any of these in school. But I would tell you that be careful about selling a business because there's a penalty. There's a penalty when you sell. It's exacted from you from our government. It's called a tax. So you don't want to sell unless certain things are apparent. I would say the time to sell is when there is a looming fundamental change to your industry. Remember we were talking about radio and so many few licenses at the table? Well, radio, I sold my radio stations. Why? Because a looming fundamental change. Luckily, I saw it, and the guy that bought it from me did not. It was a New York Stock Exchange company, and I had 3 radio stations in Indianapolis. And what he gave me for those radio stations, then, not too long ago, I can buy his whole New York Stock Exchange company with hundreds of stations and have change for what he gave me for those 3 because the industry was fundamentally changed. And that's the time you got to sell. And what happened in radio? Well, very quickly there was a satellite radio. There was these little handheld devices where you can get 1,000 songs. Young kids aren't listening anymore to the radio, to terrestrial radio. They got their own thing. Fundamental changes in radio. I don't see it ever coming back to the way it was. I bailed in the nick of time. In the nick of time. So you got to know when to fold them.